بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ونبري أحسن اليوم الدين أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to another episode and the final episode of this year's Ramadan family competition, which has been done by the ISCJ Lit and Quran Academy. This is Dr. Ahmed Muhammad, the resident director of youth and young adults at the Islamic Studies programs at the ISCJ. In the past few episodes, if you notice, we've been talking about prominent historical figures that have left their mark as pioneers and developers in the fields of social sciences, medicine, and math. Today, inshallah, we're going to be talking about another Muslim pioneer, but this time he is known for his work in the field of physics. More specifically, in the optical area of physics, which is talking about eyesight and light and the travel of light and so forth. This person is Abu Ali al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, who is also commonly known in the West by al-Hasan, which is a distorted form of his first name, al-Hasan. Now, Ibn al-Hasan was born in the year of 354 Hijri, which coincides to be the year 965 in the Gregorian calendar that we use nowadays. He was born in Basra, the city of Basra in Iraq. Now, at the time where al-Hasan was born, al-Hasan ibn Haytham was born, Basra was a hub of knowledge. It had thousands of libraries and thousands of books, and so it was a center for study and illumination. And he was born in that time in the Khilafah of an Abbasid era, which was considered the Islamic Golden Age. And it's interesting is that same period where the Islamic time was considered the Golden Age, the rest of the world were considered to be in what has been commonly known as the Dark Ages. The father of al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham worked in the governing body as part of the government of the Abbasid rule. Now, what that means is that because of his position and the place that he lived in, al-Hasan had an opportunity to be educated in the best possible way, and he had access to opportunities for an education that was unparalleled anywhere else because of his position as his father, but also where he was located. We mentioned earlier that there were tons of libraries and books, and so al-Hasan, one of those individuals who was really interested in studying and learning and educating himself. Now, he continued his studies in al-Basra, and then later on moved to Baghdad to continue his studies. Later on, he was appointed as the judge in al-Basra. Now, what does that mean if you don't have an understanding? At that time, to become a judge, you literally had to become a scholar in fiqh, right, in jurisprudence, which means that al-Hasan ibn Haytham had reached a level of education in Islamic studies in the fields of fiqh that qualified him to be a judge. However, what is interesting is that al-Haytham decided to leave his position because he desired to pursue other fields of sciences. And so he traveled in different regions in the Muslim world, because at that time the Muslim territory spanned all the way from China to Al-Andalus, Spain. That is the vast territory. And during the Abbasid era, the Khalifa, one of the Khalifas, was so interested in acquiring knowledge that this is the time where books were translated from different languages and different cultures into Arabic. And so the period of Islamic period during where the Haytham, Ibn al-Haytham had lived, had wide access to different types of knowledges from different places around the world. And so Ibn al-Haytham, when he traveled, to different areas, and he acquired so much knowledge that he actually became one of the many historical Muslims that were considered polymaths. And I know you heard this word before when we were talking about Ibn Sina. Polymath means that this person has extensive and vast knowledge that spans in several subjects. And because of that, Ibn al-Haytham actually was able to write extensively and produce writings in different fields such as math, astronomy, medicine, physics, engineering, psychology, philosophy, theology, poetry, and politics. This is how much knowledge that Ibn al-Haytham had acquired. However, his interest really relied more in the areas of math and physics and engineering a little bit, and he used that vast knowledge to produce what he is mostly commonly known to be famous for, which is actually two things. That is his advancement in visual optics in the field of physics, but also in being the person who was the founder of what is the modern time called the scientific method. And so many people refer to Ibn al-Haytham as the father of optics and arguably the first modern scientist. Now, how did he become to get known as to these two things? We're going to mention them quickly. So, as for why he was considered to be the first modern scientist, it is because Ibn al-Haytham was the first individual to have a system, right, of applying empirical analysis, right, and applying data to prove theories and hypotheses. Now, in other words, he was the first to systemically apply empirical analysis to accompany all the theoretical hypotheses and postulates in a way that is very similar to what we look at today as the scientific method, that we know today as the scientific method. And the reason behind it is because Ibn al-Haytham realized that our senses can sometimes deceive us, that our senses are prone to error. And so he devised this method of verification, of testing and experimentation to uncover the truth of the natural phenomenon that we perceive. Now, until this time, the study of physical phenomena pretty much was very abstract. Like it had this, it's been an abstract activity with occasional experiments. But Ibn Haytham was the first to make sure that he experiments to prove his hypotheses, the information that he was trying to provide as a means of a theory. And so he was the person who developed that, and this is why he's arguably considered the father or the first modern scientist. And later on, when his work got translated to Latin and other languages, it was in the Renaissance of the European Renaissance that they understood this, and now they started developing this method of the scientific method that allowed them later on to excel, but it only happened 100 years after the Muslim Golden Age. So this is why he was known to be considered the first modern scientist. Now, why is he known as the father of optics? Now, this is an interesting theory, an interesting story actually. At the time of Ibn al-Haytham, the way that we perceive, how we see, had two prominent theories. The first was that it is our eyes that emit a specific light that enables us to see. The other theory is what we know nowadays is that actually our eyes receive light, so it comes into our eyes. And Ibn al-Haytham had this idea that it was the second theory was correct, but he hasn't proved it yet. And he wasn't able to prove it until later on. When the ruler of the Fatimid area in Egypt, he had a bit of an issue with the Nile over flooding and it would cause chaos. And so he was looking for engineers to solve that problem. And he was looking for a person to build a dam. And Ibn al-Haytham was recruited due to his extensive knowledge in math and physics and engineering to pilot this plan. Now, for what reason, there's a bit of a debate on historical reasons of why that Ibn al-Haytham did not complete it, whether it's because he found that the dam would destroy certain cities or that it was not possible at that time to develop it. But nonetheless, Ibn al-Haytham did not continue the project. And because of that, he ended up being under house arrest in Egypt for the next 10 years when this ruler had lived in the Fatimid area. As he lived when he lived in that 10 year of house arrest, this is when he came upon and developed the theory of the nature of light in our vision, right? And so he's accredited for explaining. So Ibn Haytham, it was this time period he actually honed down and developed and was able to explain the nature of light and vision. And he did this through what he called al-Bayt al-Muzlim. Nowadays it's called the dark chamber, and what got translated later on in Latin to be called camera obscura. And this device he developed later on, this device formed the basis of photography. Right? And so, subhanAllah, it was a Muslim, his founding knowledge and his theories is what developed the basis of modern photography that we understand. So what is the story behind this? The story behind it is that when he was underneath his house arrest, while he was in his room one day and at night, there was a bit of a small, tiny hole in his window, which a light from the moon had shined in, and a reflected image on the wall. And when he saw that, because he was trying to think about how we see things and the nature of light, then he decided to create this device of the small chamber. Sometimes they develop this as a camera when they, a very rudimentary camera. Sometimes they do in school as an experiment. They have this dark chamber with a screen, and they put a really tiny hole, and they allow the light to shine in, and you can see the inverted image on the other side This is what he had developed. This is the first development, first experimentation that al-Haytham had developed. And so from repeated experiments, he concluded that vision is accomplished when the rays pass into his eyes. Right? After many additional experiments using special apparatus and he lenses and mirrors that he built himself, he laid down the new idea about light and vision in his most famous book, right? So he wrote many books, but his most famous book was called Al-Manazir. Literally means the book of optics, right? Kitab al-Manazir means the book of optics. And this book of optics, when it was translated into Latin and different languages, is what had the significant influence on many scientists in the Middle Ages and Renaissance and Enlightenment to understand how light works and further develop it. Now, interesting fact, today the oldest known drawing of the nervous system, of the optic nerves of the nervous system, is from Ibn al-Haytham's Book of Optics, in which he actually draw detailed diagrams of the eye and the optic nerves that were illustrated in it. And so you can see he was a founder in so many different fields, but his print and his mark was left in the field of physics, of optics, and the development of the scientific method, which should be truly honorably attributed to our beloved scientist over here, al-Hasan al-Haytham. He later on, after that 10 years of confinement, after the death of that ruler, he went out and he continued his studies. And interestingly, he lived beside al-Azhar, which was a beacon of Islamic educational university at that time. And he taught physics and he taught math. And he stayed in Cairo, in Egypt, until his death in the year of 431 Hijri, which coincides with the year 1040 in the Gregorian calendar, which means he died at the age of around 73. This will end our series, alhamdulillah, and I hope you noticed by now, through our different scientists that we covered these past few days, you'd understand that as Muslims, we were able to pioneer different fields of sciences. And unlike other cultures and other religions, Islam never contradicted with the sciences. In fact, we were the ones that pioneered it. And because we understand the nature of science, that it can never lead to certainty, that it will always change over time, we never had a problem and it never contradicted our base and our concrete and fundamental beliefs. In fact, whenever anything with a theory would contradict our belief, later on in the future, it would turn to be false. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to leave our footprint in history, similar to our previous scientists and scholars who were actually scholars in Islam before they became scholars in these different fields. And so I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the depth, to be able to acquire the depth of that knowledge and to be able to walk in the footsteps and also in the footsteps of the pious predecessors such as the Sahaba رضوان أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.